Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and of course a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor, and I just wanna quilt. So Yvonne Wilson came to me through a friend from grad school. She's a cousin of a friend of mine from grad school, and I had no idea what we were going to talk about in the interview. But it turned out to be really interesting about her relationship with community and quilting and church and charity work, and it was great. She lives in Nebraska, and it was a really great interview. I really enjoyed meeting and chatting with Yvonne. I hope you enjoy it too. All right, cool. So we'll begin with tell me who you are and where you are right now.
I am Yvonne Wilson. Right now I'm teaching up in Wayzata, Minnesota, but I usually live in Omaha, Nebraska.
What are you doing right now?
I am teaching autistic children in a resource room in Wayzata, Minnesota.
Oh, that's very cool. And what are you teaching them?
Social skills, executive functioning skills, just things that will help them better cope with interactions with all kinds of other people.
Oh, very cool. And we are connected by Susan Kling, right?
Yes, she's my cousin.
She's your cousin. So I know Susan from grad school days. We both were in the history department at UCLA. That's how I know Susan. And Susan, she probably still is, but she is, I've never met anyone who has a better memory and command of everything. There was no way to compete with Susan. She was remarkable in her ability to absorb material and then remember it and put it all together. So I suspect that that's still one of her superpowers.
I believe it.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to start our first question with, what's your first memory of someone sewing or quilting?
When I went to kindergarten, my mother designed an ABC quilt. I'm a member, or she was a member. We were members at Trinity Lutheran Church, and she sent out all the ABCs to be embroidered by women in the congregation who liked to embroider. And then she designed the quilting designs for my first kindergarten quilt, which was, she chose to do like loops along the side, and she did the cursive alphabet in the skirt of a quilt. And so after the ladies got the blocks embroidered, Mom put the top together and put the skirt together. And back then they did not have fancy quilting machines. So the summer before my kindergarten year, there was probably like 10 ladies of the congregation would come over, and they would set up the quilt on this big wooden frame, and they would sit and quilt and chat all afternoon. And it was a twin bed size, but the skirt went to the floor. So I learned how much work that was to do, and they hand quilted it all. And so I remember laying underneath the quilt and just listening to them chat and kind of watching TV a little bit. And it was just joyful.
That is really cool. That's really awesome. Do you still have the quilt?
Yes, I do.
I'd love to see a picture of it. That's really cool. Now, did the ladies do this for was this an unusual thing, or did they do this, was this some kind of tradition that happened when kids went to kindergarten? Like, do you have any idea why it occurred?
My mother, she was a organizer and just a phenomenal quilter. And cool. There was Lutheran World Relief in the church, and so they did some kind of quilting, but you can't make the quilts too pretty. Otherwise, the people don't use them. They try to, get an income off of them because they're beautiful quilts. So they would just sew all kinds of scraps together and Mom convinced them that this was a good deed to do, and she would feed them at the house, and it would be air conditioned because it was the summer, and so they all agreed to come.
That's really cool. And your mom was a quilter?
Yes.
And what kind of quilts did she make?
Traditional. She was a very precise quilter.
Yeah.
She liked to make sure that the seams met perfectly.
Yeah.
She was very artistic. She took some art in college, and she liked to draw and do watercolors, and she just had a wonderful color sense. And so she put together beautiful quilts.
That's really cool. I imagine you still have them? Do you still have her quilts?
Yes. Most of those came along later when my kids were little and she wanted to do quilts for them.
That's very sweet. So when did you start sewing or quilting?
I started at age 9. The first thing I would do is Mom sat me down, gave me a pattern, told me what some of the vocabulary was, showed me how to sew a straight seam, and then she went and washed the laundry. And so she was a teacher herself, but a lot of times it's hard to teach your own kids. So I sat down and mastered to make just a plain drawstring shirt. And then I put sewing down for a little bit, and I was more like 12 when I got the bug. And so the next thing I made was a 3-piece suit for myself.
Really? Wow.
Out of corduroy, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yes. Mom couldn't believe I did it, but I understood, and I loved sewing, and I had more patience when I was older, so that worked out well.
And so go ahead.
I did quilting for 4-H.
Huh.
My grandmother was in a assisted or a nursing home, and she needed a lap quilt. So I did a maroon and pink flowered lap quilt for her.
That's very cool. Did you machine pieced it?
Yes.
And then what did you machine quilt it or tie it, or what did you do in that first one?
I think I tied it.
Yeah.
It was just easier and quicker to do that. And I found out I didn't like the look of anything that was tied. So I quickly just drew bias lines on, and then I would just use my domestic machine to do that, just simple quilting.
Yeah.
I made a quilt for my niece. It was an embroidered panel of a cat, and it was green and purple, and they were like half square triangle blocks. And I think I got one made for my nephew, but I don't think I got one made for my last niece, but I might have. I don't remember that.
Interesting.
Let's see.
So what is your quilting like now? Now as a grown-up, what is your quilting like? I've seen your Facebook page. You've got a really cool banner of quilting. And tell me about that.
I'm a bold quilter.
You
I'm not necessarily traditional. I do before the modern quilt movement was the modern quilt movement, I was doing that.
Yeah. Tell me more.
I liked, they're called jewel box colors in the quilting world, but they're the very bold, reds are reds and emerald green and blue and, chartreuse, and the whole color palette is bold and bright.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in the quilting world for a while liked the mauves and the greens and the browns and things like that, and I thought that was too boring, and so that's why I did the maroons and the pinks and all kinds of stuff like that. I enjoy true scrap quilting, where you sew. A lot of times I put all my scraps in a bag, in a brown bag, and then I pick out one piece of fabric, and the agreement I have with myself is it doesn't matter what that fabric is, it's going to get sewn next.
Okay, so scrap quilts freak me out. So I that's exactly the reason why they freak me out is because I never feel like confident enough to figure out what should be in the scraps and which order. So you say put them all in a bag, and whatever you pull out, it's next. How do you decide in your scraps which scraps go into the bag? Because that's the other part. I would never feel like anything goes together. It kind of freaks me out. I'm not very confident on the scrappy quilt side yet.
Oh, yes. A lot of times, if you try so hard to match it, it doesn't feel right. But when you make a covenant with or a promise to yourself, no matter what's coming out, whether I like it or not, that's going to get sewed down. I just go into my, I have like 6 or 7 scrap boxes of things that were left over from other quilts or things that I have grabbed from. I work with the Mothers Guild at Boys Town. And so sometimes there we'll trade scraps among ourselves. We don't always have the same scraps for ourselves. Or we make blocks for each other and put them together, bring them to a meeting, and then make quilts there. The Mothers Guild was started by Father Flanagan's mother years ago, and it was revived in 2004, when they did some extra quilts for the Father Flanagan's house for the museum. And so Tom Lynch, the curator there, went to the Omaha Quilt Guild. And at that point, I wasn't a member there, but I was an employee on campus. And so they invited employees to be a part of the Mothers Guild, and I've been with them since 2004.
And how important is that group to you in terms of your quilting life?
Oh, very important. There's all kinds of levels of quilters. One lady is just a master with putting color together. She just can see the aura that comes off of the colors. She does a wonderful job. And, I ask her all kinds of questions because sometimes color isn't my forte either, but she's a master. And then we put the quilts together, and we do 6 quilts for graduates, and we do quilts for family teachers, assistant family teachers, and staff for their, they all have yearly parties. And then we do one for the, in May, it's a booster banquet. And so our quilt gets auctioned off.
And how much does the quilt usually go for in the auction?
That depends. For a while, we were getting probably like $600, but 2 years ago I did some old jerseys from way back when, and there was a lot of interest in that, and so I'm not sure how high that went, but it was over 600.
That's really great. So what's the strategy with these ones that you're going to be auctioning off? Do you have a particular strategy so they go for more?
Yes. Since it's a booster banquet, we would take the fabric from Creighton or UNO or some of the, those colleges around, and kind of put together something that displayed the college really nicely, because there were some graduates among the donors there, and they enjoyed that.
So we have we have an auction at school. I'm a law professor, and so each year we did. So last year I did one. So these are usually
pretty drunk law students bidding on stuff. So my strategy was Star Wars. I put a Star Wars quilting because I figured that would, and it actually went with for quite a bit. It was really good, but you got to know your audience, right? So I'm not sure what I'll do this year, but
Yes.
I didn't know if it was a fluke. But I got to think about like what do they get a bid on that they the 20-year-olds that have been drinking will be like, I want that quilt. Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Oh, I know. The best one was I got all these